As you can see, this is a review of a book from the 1880s. It is A Study in Scarlet, which happens to be the first Sherlock Holmes story. What do Sherlock Holmes, Doctor Who, and Supernatural have in common? Honestly, apart from the fact that I'm now covering all three of them, I have no fucking clue. So far, I enjoy all of them, but I'm just I don't really see what connects them. But that's beside the point. Someone can explain that in the comments. This is my first time reviewing a book. I think in really any capacity. I never saw any Sherlock Holmes content. I know of the character. I knew that he's like the best detective ever. Um, I know of Watson, obviously, but that's all I really knew. Um, Anything, I rewatched Pagemaster. I don't know if you've seen that, but Macaulay Culkin gets taken into a cartoon world with books, and they pull Hounds of Baskerville off of the shelf, and a fucking demon-looking dog thing chases them. I found out after I finished reading A Study in Scarlet, and then rewatched the movie, not thinking about it at all, that was a connection there. So that I've had in my childhood, but I've never actually watched or read any of them until now, and I've only read the first book he appeared in. So this review is going to be going in with some completely fresh eyes. I listened to the audiobook of this 3 days ago, I think. 2 days ago, 3 days ago. The story is still fresh in my mind, though. I wrote down all of the major characters here, and I have the chapters in front of me so I can just look at the title of the chapter and remember which part that was. First, I'm going to let you know why I even decided to do this, because I wasn't really thinking I was going to ever do this. But 3 months ago, I started a Doctor Who reaction series. I've got like 13 episodes into that, I think. And I also have been a Supernatural fan for a while. Wasn't a fan of the later seasons, so I started reviewing the episodes. Not very far into that, but the plan there is to just show how I think the series went downhill after an extended period of time. And then I remembered that there's a thing called Super Hulock, and I was like, well, shit, I'm already doing two of them. I might as well do the other one too. And that is why I looked up what is the first appearance of Sherlock Holmes in media, and of course, I knew it was a book, so I probably looked up a book. But then he shows up, A Study in Scarlet. Well, I saw the book was from 1887, and I thought to myself, wow, this should be a pretty good book, because this is like from a time when like a movie was like literally just a moving picture that you like spun something and you could see like a horse. And because I've seen a bunch of movies from the 1880s and 1890s, uh, so the idea of a story is, a book. So I was interested to see where this was going, and also just because I wanted to. I knew that I was probably gonna watch the old movies too, and I wanted to know the story first. Honestly excited when I found out it was from 1887, because I was like, wow, I've been in a Western kick for a while, and this isn't taking place in that area, but it's taking place in that era. So I thought that would be cool. I was not let down. In fact, some of it did take place in America. It's in two parts. I'm going to try to review this by chapter. The first part is all from Watson's perspective. And the first chapter is he's talking to a guy who, I don't remember his name. I listened to the audiobook once, and I will listen to it again. In fact, I learned from this guy about Sherlock through Watson's perspective. It's after we find out that he's a veteran and he was like a doctor in the war and he got shot and then he got sick and now he's just coming back, and he needs a place to stay. He doesn't have a lot of money, and this guy's like, well, there's this guy who also would like a roommate, and it's Sherlock Holmes, of course. And he's like, he's a bit eccentric, I'll warn you. And he's like, Watson's a bit apprehensive, but he also wants a roommate. And the guy's like, oh, he's not like mad or anything. He's just weird. And like, we find out some things that he does, which is like, the first thing we find out about Sherlock Holmes is that he beats up corpses to figure out how much bruising they can get post-mortem. Is not unheard of. There was, I'm pretty sure there was like stuff like that going on, much more worse than that going on in relation to the medical field. But they don't like tell you like what his job is or what he's doing. They like in the first chapter they allude to him having like these studies, but like none of them are. You can't really take them and put them to a particular science or a particular like doctorate that he's trying to get or anything like that. There's no like college course, but there's a lot of different studies. And then when Watson and Sherlock meet, Sherlock has invented this genius fucking thing that probably exists now. Didn't then, but he pricks the finger and puts some blood in this cup, and it's clear. And then he takes this liquid and he puts it in there, and all of a sudden the water turns red, and like the stuff at the bottom coagulates or something, and it's a liquid that can detect blood anywhere, anytime, no matter how dry or wet. And he's like, this is gonna make detective work so much easier. Although he doesn't say that, because like you don't find out what his job is for a while. Watson has to spend a good chapter and a half before he figures that out. These characters, though, like, I really enjoy them. Like, Watson's a pretty logical dude, but he has a sense of right and wrong. And Sherlock is just a genius. And then in chapter 2, you get more of a sense of them when they're settled into the house, right? And Watson is taking note of like everything Sherlock is a genius about, but everything that he's just doesn't know anything about. And to the point where Watson and me discovers that in 1887, Sherlock Holmes was unaware that the Earth revolved around the sun. And Watson was dumbfounded at that. And he was shocked. And Sherlock basically said something to the effect of like, your brain has a limited amount of space for you to put new information in. So eventually there will come a time where every time you learn something, you have to throw something out. So I'm not gonna bother learning something that's not important to my profession. I forgot to mention the part where he says, where Sherlock, after finding out about the Earth revolving around the sun, said he's just gonna forget that. And it's truly a genius outlook. He's focusing all of his mental power on just the things that are going to help him in his profession, and it's going to make him so much more better at it. And Watson finds this notebook, another piece of wisdom with Sherlock, and it's basically just simple, subtle psychology where like you can tell if someone's lying or something like that just by looking at their face and reading it. And the fact that Sherlock is able to do this and then has set out a list of like a paper on it It's genius. It says that he can guess what anyone's profession is based on just how they're moving and looking and all that stuff. And Watson's like bullshit, but at every turn, Sherlock is completely right. Point where we find out what he is. So Sherlock Holmes, I had to look in the book again to make sure I got the descriptive word right, but a consulting detective. I'm sure that I'm telling you something that you already know, but this is the first time I've ever heard of it. Other detectives go to when they can't solve a case, and the idea is that he solves the case for them, and then they get the credit, and he gets paid. So it's noble, and it shows that he's not doing it for like the public recognition of it all, although he would like to have some recognition. Like big on it though, it's not his main goal. Like even at the end, he doesn't really care that much. A few more things we learn about Sherlock in this chapter too. He's a violinist, which is good. I mean, we learned that in chapter 1, but we figure out what kind of violinist he is in chapter 2, where like he basically uses his instruments to get out all of the emotions that's trapped in his body. And then after he's done doing that, he'll play some classics that Watson loves to make up for it. And he'll be like nice and chipper, and then he'll have depressive like days on end where he'll just sit on the couch and do nothing. We find out later that that's most likely because he was just solving a fucking murder, and he's a little bummed. And he says to just don't bug him and just leave him alone when he's in that state, which is probably good advice. That Sherlock doesn't really seem to have friends, but a lot of people come over and deal with him with like money, and whenever they do, he asks Watson to be in another room. Odd is one that he mentions by name in the second chapter, and is the only character that I've noticed has like a link out of the two. When I read about them on Wikipedia, Lestrade has a link on his name, and Gregson's not mentioned. So I'm like, okay, well, I don't think he's going to be coming back. Irrelevant at this point, but just saying. And the end of chapter 2, a retired sergeant delivers a message to Sherlock Holmes. Sherlock Holmes guesses from like I guess they have a big window in the front room because they constantly are looking out on the street, and it's mentioned later that they had that window. But from across the street, he's like, yeah, that guy's a retired sergeant. After the message is delivered, Watson's like, what's your trade? And he confirms it. They lead into chapter 3, which is the letter. Oh god, I'm rereading over some of it so I can remember just everything that happens, and I forgot to mention something, but it's coming right up in the conversation. Because I'm trying to get to... I can't remember who specifically asked him to take a look at this case. I'm trying to remember which one it was. I'm rereading it, and Watson, of course, is now bumfounded. Like, he's like really happy about Sherlock being actually this perceptive. He explains like a bunch of reasons why he knew that was that guy's profession, just by the way he walked and his stature. The book, no shit. After he's done explaining all of the reasons he knew, Watson's like, "Wonderful!" I ejaculated. That's what it says. That's fucking funny, and it happens twice in the book. And the other time it happens is in the last chapter, at a very like climactic moment, and it just takes you out of it and makes you laugh your ass off. I don't know. Anyway, I've gotten to the letter. It was Greg. And sent the letter, and the letter is telling Sherlock to come investigate the death of Drebber. Drebber is a fucking piece of shit. On from that for right now, they find the case. And the first thing that Sherlock does is he walks up and down and he looks at all of the ground and he makes sure he has all of that information going in. They go into the house. He goes in and they find the body. The reason they need Sherlock Holmes is because there is no injuries on the body at all, but there's blood on the wall, and it says Raki. And I knew when they said that that's what it said, I was like, oh, that has to be a foreign language or code. But the cop was like, that's got to be Rachel, but they missed the L. And I'm like, there's no sign of him needing to leave in a hurry, though. Sherlock later confirmed it was German. And I was like, ah, sweet. But at that point is when I found out it said revenge. And I had the thought of like, alright, well, who wanted revenge on this guy? Of course, when Sherlock smelled his mouth, I was like, oh, poison. Because that is why he would be smelling the mouth, and it also would be the only reason this guy would be dead. The wedding ring threw me off. I figured that whoever killed him might have his wife or have killed his wife or something, and it couldn't be further from the truth. But that was my first impressions of that. It's right fucking then, because we find out at the end that that's basically when he knew who did it. And it's I mean, obviously this whole entire thing is going to be spoiler filled, so the cab driver did it. And he could tell because the horses were like, the horse troughs looked as if they were waiting there for a while without anyone watching them. Sit there while their cabbie murdered someone and came back. I think that it's very interesting to re-go through this because I'm trying to not think about the second half while I'm reviewing the first half, but also I should be, because like chronologically, the second half of the book mostly happens before the first half of the book. And once you know who Drebber is, you really don't want the killer to get caught. Subtle hints of that all throughout the book, even before you get to the part. Because like later on, when they get home, Watson's thinking to himself, like the look on his face, there was so much hatred behind it that it just seemed good that he was gone. And I'm like, Jesus, dude. Then when I found out like what I know now, and the last thing he saw before he died, it all just kind of made sense. Takes the course of like 3 days, and solves this fucking case, and of the guy that found the body. He then sends a telegram. The other detectives know that says Rocky in German, revenge, and the guy was poisoned. Two things they did not know. The guy is a certain height based on his stride. He tells them around what his face looked like. He refers to him as the details of the shoe. And the stuff that we don't really find out till later. He's already sent word into this guy's background to figure out what's going on, and he figures out that he's already requested protection from a man, Jefferson Hope. And at that point he already knows. So he has a bunch of street kids looking for this cab driver named Jefferson Hope in all of the cab stations, all throughout this day. So what they do is they go and they interview the guy that found the body, and they realize that Jefferson came back for the ring, realized the cop was there, acted drunk, and the cop let him go. Like, helped him up to his feet and walked him away. And that is just, when the first time you're reading it, you're like, oh, you fucking idiot. But then when you're thinking about it all in hindsight after you know the whole story, you're like, ah, fuck yeah, yes, Jefferson. Because Jefferson's great. Of the ring, and they set up a trap where they have someone. They basically set out an ad saying they found the ring in the street because Sherlock deducts that the killer might also suspect that they might have dropped it elsewhere, and if they did, they wouldn't have to worry about it being linked to the murder. And if they did suspect that it was linked to the murder, they would send someone else. And a man disguised as an old lady comes, completely fools them, gets the ring, and then leaves. But Sherlock tails him for a long time. But then, once the cab stops, she's gone. She just vanished. So, I mean, that's the story that Sherlock relays back to Watson when he gets back. About who was helping Jefferson, and it makes me happy because at the end, Jefferson is asked who was helping you, and Jefferson's like, I can tell my own secrets, but not anyone else's, and he winks at Watson, which is just. This is the chapter. By the way, we've been in chapter 4 for a while now. Once we were into the interview, we get the reference to the title of the book. I found the quote. It's very long, so I'm going to try and find just a few sentences where it's in there. I shall have him, Doc asks Sherlock, why would he come back to the house? That's not what fucking people do. Thank you for it all. I might not have gone but for you, and so have missed the finest study I ever came across. A study in Scarlet, eh? Why shouldn't we use a little art jargon? There's a scarlet thread of murder running through the colorless skein of life, and our duty is to unravel it, and isolate it, and expose every inch of it. There's shit, but yeah, that is the quote, the title of the book. And I think that given the whole context of the entire book, it has a lot to say about murder and who is wrong and who is right and justice and all that shit. And I think that it's a great book. 3 and 4, or not 3 and 4, but 4 and 5 of interviewing the cop and the ring setup thing. Because honestly, I was listening to an audiobook, so I was just doing it all at once. So I guess that he starts thinking about the dude's face and how it was not, like, it looked evil, so he was like, it's probably better off that he's dead. And then he was like, well, of course, that doesn't make it okay. He still has to go to the law. I disagree, given what happens in the second half of the book, but we'll get there. Genius things that he has saying, like, about music and how it speaks to the soul. Gregson, and then Lestrade giving what they've done in the past few days. out, we're even close to figuring it out. But we get more of a hint that Drebber is a piece of shit. Strangerson, his partner, is now also dead, having been stabbed. And several items were taken by Lestrade from the, I think it was Lestrade, from the scene. With, at Watson and Sherlock's house, he has them. Gregson, I believe, is the one who arrested a man who chased because Drebber is a piece of shit. The point where Sherlock's like, give me those pills, because Lestrade has a box of pills that he says were right by the corpse of Strangerson. Fuck him. And they find out by testing it on a dog that was already dying of old age. Still, I was like, what the fuck? They take half of one of the pills, give it to the dog. They wait for a very long time, nothing happens, and Sherlock's just getting impatient. And he's like, and he takes the other pill, and he cuts it in half, and he puts it in the water, and that time the dog so much as licks it, and then just dies. So they realize that the container has which one is kind of the gag, and now in hindsight of the whole book, knowing that Jefferson always was going to take the one the other guy didn't take, and the only reason that Strangerson got stabbed was because he was like, I'm not taking that pill, and he tried to attack him, and so Jefferson's like, shit. That's what happened. And I'm like, shh, I don't but no. Of a douche, because he's like berating this family, and he finds out that they're trying to protect their son, but they also know that he didn't do it, and that's the son that goes to get locked up, and it's all this big ordeal. But even then, I was like, it's not that unjustified. He tried to like go your teenage daughter, literally, and then the man fucking beat him off with a stick. It sounded wrong. You know what I mean? Hit him with a stick and running at him. I would have beat the fuck out of him. Point is that after that happened was the last time anyone saw Drebber, except the murderer. The bitter irony of that moment. Anyway, they're talking about how Lestrade was thinking it was Strangerson, and then when Strangerson shows up, dead. This is that while Gregson and Lestrade are there actively asking for help because both of their theories ran dry. Of kids brings the killer, Jefferson Hope, to them. It's like, here's the cabbie you wanted. Sherlock handcuffs him and is like, I present to you Jefferson Hope, the murderer of Drebber and Strangerson. And then Hope jumps out the window trying to escape, and then they get him, and then they wrestle him down, and then he's like, he just stops. Like, the book kind of, the first half of the book ends there, and then the rest of that storyline picks up at the end of the second half of the book. I'll admit, for that first chapter, for a moment, I was like, what is this? And I even Googled it, like, what is the rest of this book? And they're like, I basically found out the motive is the rest of the book. And I was like, okay, it is not just two different stories. I thought, but, so then I read the rest of it. Again, I was listening to an audiobook, but I don't know if you call that reading or not. Is about John Ferrier and his adoptive daughter, Lucy. And he's got her under his, like, cloak. She's, like, wrapped around him. He's emaciated. He has, like, had no food or water. He's walking with her. And then he finally just comes to these rocks, and he's just like, ugh. And she's like, that hurt. And he's like, sorry. And then that's when you find out she's even there. And so she sits down, and he's sitting down, and he's just like, he's figuring out we're gonna die soon. And she's like, where's mom? And he's like, she's gone. It's just sad. Him, which means that if they did have any water or food before, she was the one that was getting it. She even mentions that he's, like, really dirty. He hasn't showered, and he's like, yeah, no, that's not happening. And basically reveals that, like, everyone that was with them is dead, including her mom and probably her brother. Kind of accept death. She's, like, way too chill about it. Like, we'll see mom in heaven. And I was just like, oh my god. And John was telling her to say her prayers that she would say every night, and she's like, it's the daytime, and he's like, God won't mind. Rescued. Dust, and then it's like, oh, that wasn't anybody. And then they start falling asleep. The scavengers come to eat them away, and Lucy mistakes them for, like, chickens and ducks or something. And then the cavalcade comes, and it's just like 10,000 people. And then in my back of my mind, I was thinking, this is too good to be true. There's probably enemies. And oh, was I right. Now, after I finished into actual history to see how accurately Mormons are depicted in this book, and it's accurate enough for me to not have any problems with it. A lot of murder, a lot of child brides, and by that I mean a lot per person, a lot of fucked up shit. And they would basically get into small wars with towns and then move town. And this is literally them fleeing from one of those towards Utah. They come across this old man and his daughter. Literally in this scene, he adopts her. Basically tell them, like, if you want to convert to Mormonism, you can come with us. If not, we're going to leave you here to die. And that is pretty fucking accurate to how they were back then. They referred to non-Mormons as, like, I forgot what they called them. Which is fucked up. And the whole story revolves around the fucked up way that town was run in the 1860s, which is when that portion of this timeline takes place. The first scene's like the first scene that I just described with them getting picked up and saved. That scene was like the 1847 or some shit. Then we cut to, like, the 1860s when Lucy's, like, I have no idea, like 18, 19, 20. I don't know. She could have even been younger than that. I don't know. But she meets this man named Jefferson who's not a Mormon, and they fall in love. He befriends John, and John even gives his permission for them to be together. But Jefferson Hope, the man that she fell in love with, goes off to, I don't know, make money, enough money to support them or some shit. I don't remember what he was doing, but he said he was going to go off and he would come back to get her when it was time. And rumors spread, and basically this town is like a cult. Anyone that did anything that went against the top of their like Mormon food chain would go missing, and no one would say anything. Top were these four people, and then below them you got Drebber and Strangers, and the two that got murdered. And once you find out that's who they are, you're already like, all right, well, then the murderer clearly had a good reason. Because this cult questions the Mormon faith anyway, in any way. Once that Lucy marry a Gentile, while they're running short on women, they even say like they were basically kidnapping women because they were running out of women and like enslaving them, and it's just horrifying. And the council offers John and like either Lucy can marry one of these two men, obviously the two victims, by the end of the month, or you're fucked. They're gonna kill you. And they only agreed to become Mormon just because if they didn't, they would have died. They are trapped in this situation, and basically they send word to Jefferson to come rescue them, and they wait it out, and my God, Jefferson shows up on the last day. Like, he could show up. And, like, the first, like, it's like you have a month, and the next day, the two dudes show up, and they're like, which one of us do you want? And Drever's this fucking snobby, nasally fuck with 7 wives, and Strangerson's, well, like, I only have 4 wives, and it's like, fuck you both, get the fuck out of, fuck off. And he almost shoots them. I would have shot them. He almost shoots them a few times. I really like John Ferrier. Passionate about the story that I'm giving less fucks about stopping for the chapters, but it's intense as fuck the whole time because they set up that like people die here all the time from this. Like from like saying things that are outside of Mormon faith. This man town or die trying. And it is a true testament to just like the human condition. The gun, like little notes. Like at first it was like one that was just a note. He woke up, there was a note on his heart that said 30. And then like there was just etchings on doors if they couldn't get in the house because he stayed up all night with a gun that would be like on the front porch or tied to the fence post or just every day. And literally the number 2 shows up, then the number 1 shows up, and they're waiting for the next morning. And that's when Jefferson shows up. And it's so just insanely, nail-bitingly tense. It's just like, oh my God. He had to like sneakily crawl and slither his way up to the door and scratch at the bottom of the door until the door was opened, and then he slid his way in like that, burst up, shut the door, and like, alright, they're watching every corner. Jefferson gets his money bag, and Jefferson gets a bunch of food, John gets the money bag, Lucy just gets some stuff, I don't know, and like some stuff that she's very sentimental about. I probably would too. They crawl out the window one by one, and then they do the thing where they're like on the ground, sneaking, and they do that all the way up to the cornfield. And then, like I think that at this point they're like up, and then Jefferson hears something, and then they just go back down. And at this point, I'm realizing that Jefferson is a badass motherfucker. He is one of my favorite characters in the book. And when the coast is clear, they dart through, and then they get to Jefferson's horses that he had out in the rocks. They get on those horses, they go out the trail, and they meet one person. Well, first they go by a person that didn't see them, but then they meet a fucking person. And it's obviously they're still within Utah range, and they get some code, and they're like, we had permission from the Big Four, or whatever the fuck you call them. There's 4 of them. They're in charge. Code. And Jefferson gives back a code that he heard when they were hiding earlier. They're allowed to pass. They get really fucking far away. Over a dangerous track. And so close to freedom. They're running low on food. And Jefferson, he shoots an animal, and it falls, and he goes to track it down. Oh, you already know. He gets lost. He gets back at night, and he calls back when he finds camp. There's no answer, of course. And of course, you're suspecting the worst. And it's even worse than that, because there's only one grave. Warrior is dead. And Jefferson returns. And that Strangerson's the one who shot John. And it's all starting to come together now. And this is the point in the story where I'm just like, I already know those two got their fucking desserts. But I'm still worried about Lucy. Remembering the ring, a month goes by. Because Jefferson's far too starved and weak and alone to rescue her at this point. She dies of sadness. Because she's married to Drebber. She's his 5th wife or so. Where we were then and where we began the story, the 20-year span, he was mainly just tracking them down. First, he tracked them for a while, and then he realized that he would be dead if he kept living in the woods right outside the town. So he left for 5 years or so to get his health up again. And get the 2 men he was after are gone. And he goes state by state tracking these men down to kill them. Because I can just, like, the idea of being in either side of the situation where, like, and camp is ravaged, and to come back and everyone's gone or dead, and you just can't really do anything at that point. But Jefferson could do something. This wasn't some ravaged animals, these were men. And justice needs to be done. And of course, we're getting to the end of the 5th chapter, which is the end of this section, and then from 6 onward is Watson's perspective again. get away with it. But I also like the idea of Sherlock getting his credit. And I didn't get either of those, but I gotta say, the ending wasn't unsatisfying to me. I don't know. It's just Jefferson at this thing away, and he just gives up, and he gives a full testimony, and he doesn't go on repeating what we just read for the last 5 chapters, but he explains that he was avenging 2 people. He goes over what happened and how he did it, which is great after you hear who these people were. He stalked Drebber for months. And they were in Europe, and then he tracked them all over Europe. He finally found them here, and he stalked them for weeks as a cabbie, but they were always together. And when they weren't together, that one night, Drebber was staying with people, and then he, of course, like I said, he did the wrong thing, got kicked out, and he came back and he tried to fucking kidnap their teenage daughter, because he wants another fucking kidnapped wife. Fuck this guy, kill him already. And then, after he's, again, beaten off with a stick, he gets in the cab of Jefferson. And Jefferson is just so giddy. And Jefferson has this heart thing where, like, at any point, his heart could just stop. Drebber go and get shit-faced. Essentially, like, he makes sure that he's not, like, he's still letting this guy have his last good day before he kills him, which, I don't know, the anger of the, I don't know. Anyway, he has the pills, and he takes them out, and he takes out the ring, because when Lucy died, Jefferson snuck in, kissed her on the forehead, took the ring, and he kept the ring the whole time to show it to him right when he killed him. And he made him pick which pill, and he took the other one. So, and it was glorious. Never gives a name. Stranger, and he gave him the same deal, but Strangerson is less of a little bitch than Drebber, so he attacks and gets stabbed. And this again, he's like, he reached for my neck, and I stabbed him in self-defense. And it's like, well, you were going there to kill him anyway, so. But either way, at the end of the story, Sherlock solves the mystery in 3 days. And Jefferson dies before he can even get to trial. And Watson thinks that, like, Sherlock should be getting the credit. He's angry that these 2 got the credit. And doesn't care that much. And Watson's book, basically the book we just read, and I don't know, it's a whole lot. Make the book about what happened to make sure Sherlock gets his credit. He says, in the meantime, you must make yourself contented by the consciousness, like the Roman miser. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce it, but here's what the last line of the book is, but in Roman. The public hiss at me, but I cheer myself when I contemplate the coins in my strongbox. I'll get the credit he wants, but he's like, you got paid. But in a very... And... God, I don't know. Because I think that the indifference to the circumstances of the murder is faulty. Meaning, once you have all the facts, Jefferson shouldn't be punished. But he was dead of natural causes before he even went to trial, so he basically escaped it. But it does paint Sherlock and Watson in a bit of a gray area. I still like the Doctor. He's in a bit of a gray area. But that's... Hey, maybe that's the connection. I don't know. That's... worst to best now. And this is not planned, so I have to think about it a bit. Once I got past a certain point, it was pretty indisputable. For this list. Fuck this piece of shit. He's only a little bit worse than Strangerson, but it's there. He's more pompous. He has more wives. It's just none of those women can be happy, and the fact that most of them we know from history, have been like enslaved and are very underage. It's just fuck these two dudes. And of course, Drebber is the reason that Lucy dies. For his life, and Drebber just took the pill. There's a little bit more dishonor there, because Drebber is not the one who shot John, but just what had to happen in that month with Lucy is enough for me to say Drebber is worse than Strangerson, and I'm glad he's dead. God wasn't on his side, because he was a religious fanatic. Fuck Drebber. Number 8, fuck him, he killed John. He also wanted to enslave Lucy. It's just evil. Fuck these two fucks. I already compared them, and Strangerson's just less of a little bitch. Even though he's below him as far as like monetary value. He's apparently his servant or some shit. He's still slightly better than Drebber, but I'm glad both are dead. Fuck them both. And now we're in the characters that I like or find amusing, and I don't hate the rest of these characters. And number 7 is Tobias Gregson. Kinda, I don't know how to phrase it, but he's like big and loud and full of energy, it seems. And he's not the best detective either. He seems a little inconsiderate of the people that he's questioning about Drebber. And he seems to jump to conclusions too. Number 6, detective. It doesn't really stand out that much, but he seems smarter and more cooperative than Gregson. We have Lucy. Very strong-willed person. Like, she's immediately at 5 years old, she's just ready to die. Decision to have her married off to someone. She's like a well-read. We see her like survive like a horse doing stuff next to a bunch of cows that like most people wouldn't be able to survive, just to show a level of badassness to her before she's basically just the damsel in distress for the rest of it. The whole the whole book, you really feel for her, and you really don't want her to have to go through any of this. You don't want her to be married to one of these two fucks against her will. You don't want her to be murdered for not doing that. And the end result is awful and horrendous and sad. And at the end of the book, when Jefferson is explaining the murders, he says the two ghosts of the farriers were walking with him when he did it, and I like to think that's true, and it got me emotional there at the end. Of he seems like a really cool dude. He seems quite logical. He's a little odd. Like he's his initial reaction to Sherlock's claim of being able to read people like that is a little disrespectful, but he quickly comes around and is like, "Wow, that's impressive, dude." He's just a good dude, and he actually serves the investigation quite well. He's the one that gives Sherlock the inspiration to use the ring as bait. He's also the reason that they went out to do this in the first place, because Sherlock was going to be like, I don't want to help them in their investigation right now. And he's seen some battles and shit, and he took it upon himself to write this book to tell everyone, hey, Sherlock Holmes dude is the one who solved all these crimes, not these two detectives you're giving credit to. And I think that that is admirable to do that. He falls short of my top three because they're just so... They're such great characters, the top three. He's starving, and he's just trying to keep this 5-year-old girl alive, and who's lost her mother and father and all these people. And once they're rescued, he agrees to go to mass and do all this other Mormon shit that he doesn't really agree with that much. But throughout his whole time there, he never takes a wife, and he never allows his daughter to be taken by any Mormons. He says he'd over his dead body, which happens to come true. He's appalled by the idea of them all taking so many wives, and the idea that after the families that are there have run out of daughters, they start kidnapping women. It's just horrifying and terrible, and the whole idea that this whole town is run by basically like this group, like this underground cult group that are just taking out anyone that says anything they don't agree with. It's evil, and we need those types of people murdered. Get the fuck out of my house, I will shoot you. Like, he's not fucking around with that shit. He's like a man of his word. He will die before he lets you kidnap his daughter and force her into your fucking bullshit. And I don't know, I think he's a badass. I think that while I was like, oh my god. And I was just worried for Lucy at that point too, but oh my god. And the idea that he died having to know that his daughter was being taken at that point. It's just so fucked up and very sad. But there's still two characters that I liked more. And you already know who they are by process of elimination. Yes, that's right. Sure, studying Scarlet. Maybe after I read more of these books and watch some of the media, then Sherlock might raise. But I like him. I think he's very relatable. He's a genius. He can read people like that. He has so many useful skills. Point out any type of tobacco ash and tell you what kind it is, which is just fucking amazing. And he's a genius. He just falls short because he's not Jefferson Hope, who's my number one. And just like how genius he is with like certain things, and like how other things he's just like, I don't give a fuck, that's not important, while other people are gonna be like, what, and I'm just like, I don't care. Like, I can relate to Sherlock in many different areas, and I quite enjoy it. But Jefferson Hope, he's like a fucking, he's a bad, like from the old west. He's determined, and he is, I don't know, it's just so great. Like, he's able to sneak past all of these guards, sneak them out, and survive for a whole year, maybe months, just sitting right around outside of Utah, like Salt Lake City, the town where the fuckers are, and uh, and then he goes and gets help, and then he still is able to track them down all the way through town. He kills them, and he's not even like he's a better man than me because he lets fate decide with these poison pills, and he, like, if I'm wrong, then I'll die too, or then I'll die instead. He's he's a good man. He's avenging two innocents that had their lives taken from them in multiple ways. And it just sucks that he has to, die at the end and get caught, but he died happy knowing that he solved his his that he completed his goal. They're quite long, obviously, and I have a lot going on right now. But if you're interested in anything else, you can check around the channel. I also have a podcast. And catch you later. Like and subscribe and all that bullshit.